You got 10 seconds to clean this shit up or I make you lick it off the floor. The boot comes down hard on Marcus Freeman's hand, crushing his fingers against the cold concrete, the mop handle clattering away. Pain explodes up his arm, white-hot, sharp, the kind that makes vision blur and breath catch. I said, clean it. Warden Hollis stands above him, 6'3" of institutional authority wrapped in pressed khakis and a badge that's been pinned to his chest for 23 years. Behind him, 3 correctional officers, Barrett, Rodriguez, Chen, all watching, all waiting to see if Marcus will do something stupid. He won't. Not yet. I'm cleaning it, sir. His voice stays level, measured, the kind of calm that takes 12 years of prison discipline to build. I was cleaning it when you— Don't tell me what you were doing. Hollis's boot lifts, presses down again, not crushing this time, just pressure, enough to make Marcus's hand go numb, enough to telegraph exactly who has power here. You were talking back. You were making excuses. And in my facility, inmates don't do either of those things. The cafeteria stretches behind them, 200 feet of stainless steel tables and fluorescent lights, and the particular smell of industrial cleaner mixed with whatever the state budgeted for this week's meat substitute. Dinner service ended 20 minutes ago. 800 inmates fed, processed, returned to their cells. Assembly line incarceration grinding on. Marcus was doing his job, mopping the floor like he's done every night for 6 years. The same job that keeps him away from the yard, away from the politics, away from the violence that defines life for most men in Redstone Correctional. Kitchen duty, low profile, survival. The spill had been accidental. Gravy boat tipped during cleanup. Maybe 2 feet of liquid spreading across the floor. Nothing that wouldn't mop up in 3 minutes. But Hollis had been watching, had been waiting, had walked into the cafeteria at exactly the moment Marcus bent to reach for something beneath the prep counter and decided that looked like laziness, looked like an inmate getting comfortable, looked like an opportunity to remind everyone how things work here. Pick up the mop. Hollis removes his boot, steps back. The 3 officers behind him shift positions, hands near their belts, near the pepper spray, the tasers, the radios that would bring 20 more uniforms running if Marcus did anything that looked like resistance. He picks up the mop. His hand throbs. 2 fingers definitely sprained, maybe broken. He's had worse. The gravy comes up in 3 passes. Hollis watches the whole time. When it's done, the floor gleaming wet under the lights, Marcus straightens, keeps his eyes down, waits for permission to return to his cell. You're done when I say you're done. Hollis walks to the prep counter, runs 1 finger along the stainless steel surface, holds it up to the light. Dust. Barely visible, the kind of microscopic accumulation that happens in any kitchen between deep cleans. This is filthy. The prep counter, the stove, the refrigerator seals, all of it. You're staying until it's spotless. That'll take 4 hours, sir. Then you better get started. The officers laugh. Barrett's laugh is sharp, performative, the sound of a man who knows his job depends on the warden being entertained. Rodriguez doesn't laugh, just watches, with flat eyes that have seen this show before. Chen pulls out his phone, starts scrolling. Bored already. Marcus turns back to the prep counter and begins scrubbing. The cafeteria empties behind him. The officers leave one by one until it's just Chen standing by the door, phone in hand, counting down his shift until someone relieves him at midnight. That's when Marcus stops scrubbing and starts remembering. Not everything, not all at once, just enough. The badge number on Hollis's chest, C0147. The timestamp on the wall clock when the boot came down, 7:34 p.m. The witness, Chen. Bored but present, recording everything even if he doesn't know it yet. Marcus has spent 12 years in Redstone Correctional learning how with systems work, how power moves, how the people at the bottom survived by being invisible. But he's also spent the last 4 years learning something else,
something the warden doesn't know about, something that will change everything when the moment comes. But that's later. Right now, he scrubs. And he waits. If you think you know where this is going, you're wrong. Stay with me. 6 years earlier, Marcus Freeman walks into Redstone Correctional through the Intake Processing Center at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. The handcuffs come off. The county jail jumpsuit gets swapped for state prison khakis. The property clerk catalogs his belongings. 1 leather wallet, $14 in cash. 1 watch, broken. 1 wedding ring, gold band, engraved inside with initials M and S, and a date from 15 years ago when the world was different. The ring goes into a manila envelope. The envelope goes into a locker. The locker gets assigned a number, P7841, that matches the number now stenciled on every piece of clothing Marcus will wear for the next 12 to 15 years. His sentence: armed robbery, first offense. The kind of mistake that happens when a man loses his job, can't pay his mortgage, watches his wife Sarah work 2 shifts at the hospital to keep their daughter Keisha in school, and decides that desperation justifies walking into a convenience store with his brother's pistol. No one got hurt. The clerk handed over $340. Marcus made it 6 blocks before the police caught him. The trial took 3 days. The jury took 90 minutes. The judge showed no mercy for a man who'd made a choice that endangered lives, even if he'd never pulled the trigger. 12 to 15 years. Eligible for parole after 8 with good behavior. Sarah had sat in the gallery, Keisha beside her, 9 years old, not understanding why Daddy had to go away. The look on Sarah's face. Not anger. Worse. Disappointment. The knowledge that the man she'd married had become someone she didn't recognize. Processing takes 4 hours. Medical exam, psychological evaluation, housing assignment. Marcus answers every question truthfully, shows no resistance, displays the kind of compliance that prison intake officers interpret as low risk. He's assigned to C Block, cell 217, bunk A. His cellmate is a man named Deshaun Morris, 16 years into a 25-year sentence for distribution. Deshaun is 42, graying at the temples, wearing the particular expression of someone who's made peace with dying inside these walls. First time? Deshaun asks when Marcus climbs onto the lower bunk. Yeah. Marcus sets his bedroll down. Issued blanket, issued pillow, both smelling of industrial laundry. Then listen good, because I'm only saying this once. Hollis runs this place. Not the warden on paper, but Hollis. Senior correctional officer, 23 years on the job. He's got connections to the guards, the kitchen, the laundry, the commissary. Cross him, and your life gets hard in ways you can't imagine. So don't cross him. Deshaun lies back on his bunk, hands behind his head. Learn the routine, do your job, stay invisible. That's how you survive here. What if staying invisible isn't enough? Then you better hope you've got something worth trading when they decide to notice you anyway. Marcus doesn't understand what that means. Not yet. But he files it away. First data point. The first 6 months are survival, learning the rhythm of the place. Wake at 5:30 a.m., breakfast at 6, work detail at 7, lunch at noon, yard time at 2, unless there's a lockdown, which happens twice in the first month alone. Fights in the yard, contraband discovered in C Block, the usual chaos that defines prison life for men who have nothing left to lose except the small dignities they can carve out of institutional routine. Marcus gets assigned to laundry detail, 8 hours a day feeding industrial washers, folding state-issued uniforms, inhaling bleach fumes that burn his lungs and leave him coughing through dinner. It's mindless work, isolating, which is exactly what he needs. Time to think, time to adjust, time to understand the invisible rules that govern this place. Deshaun was right. Hollis is everywhere. Not physically present, but his influence seeps through every interaction. The guards who report to him, the inmates who owe him favors, the contraband that flows through the prison. Cigarettes, pills, cell phones all moving through channels Hollis controls. Cross him, and suddenly your cell gets tossed every week. Your commissary orders get lost. Your visitor privileges get suspended for violations you didn't commit. Stay in his good graces, and life gets a little easier. Not easy. Prison is never easy, but survivable. Marcus learns to stay invisible, keeps his head down in the cafeteria, doesn't make eye contact in the yard, writes letters to Sarah and Keisha twice a week, short notes that never mention how much he misses them because that would make the missing unbearable. Sarah writes back, once a month. Brief updates. Keisha's doing well in school. The mortgage is current. Work at the hospital is steady. The letters are kind but distant, the emotional distance growing with every envelope. By month 7, Marcus realizes that staying invisible isn't working. Hollis has noticed him anyway. Not because Marcus did anything wrong, but because invisibility in prison is its own kind of visibility. The quiet inmates, the ones who don't cause trouble, they're the ones who get volunteered for the jobs no one else wants. Kitchen duty becomes available in month 8. The previous cook, a man named Rodriguez, not the guard, but an inmate who'd worked the kitchen for 6 years, caught a shank in the yard during a riot. He survived, barely, but he's done with kitchen work, done with Redstone entirely, transferred to a medical facility downstate. The position opens. Hollis fills it. Freeman, report to kitchen supervisor tomorrow, 5 a.m. That's not a request. That's an order. Deshawn shakes his head when Marcus tells him, kitchen duty, either the best job or the worst job in this place, depending on how you handle it. What's the difference? The difference is whether Hollis decides you're useful or whether he decides you're a problem. And if he decides you're a problem, then you better hope you've got something worth trading. That phrase again. Marcus still doesn't understand it, but he's starting to. The kitchen at Redstone Correctional feeds 800 inmates 3 times a day. Industrial-scale food preparation managed by one civilian supervisor, a woman named Barbara Chen, 20 years on the job, and 4 inmate workers who rotate through 12-hour shifts. The work is brutal. Hauling 50-pound sacks of potatoes, prepping vegetables for 800 servings, managing ovens that run at 400 degrees in a room with no air conditioning. Heat, noise, grease, the constant pressure of feeding hundreds of men who will riot if the food runs out or the portions get cut. Marcus learns fast. Barbara Chen is fair, demanding, but fair. She doesn't tolerate laziness, but she respects competence. Within 3 weeks, Marcus is running the morning prep. Within 2 months, he's managing inventory. Within 4 months, he knows the kitchen better than anyone except Barbara. That's when the trouble starts. It's a Wednesday, late July. Heat index outside pushing 105. The kitchen is an inferno. Marcus is prepping lunch, chicken quarters, rice, green beans, when Hollis walks in. He doesn't visit the kitchen often, doesn't need to, but today he's here, and he's not alone. 2 men follow him. Not guards, civilians, suits, despite the heat. They carry clipboards and wear visitor badges that identify them as county health inspectors. Freeman, Hollis's voice cuts through the kitchen noise. These gentlemen are conducting a routine inspection. You'll provide them full access to storage areas, preparation zones, and equipment. Marcus wipes his hands on his apron. Yes, sir. Full cooperation. The inspectors spend 90 minutes going through everything, opening refrigerators, checking temperature logs, inspecting prep surfaces. They take notes, lots of notes. When they leave, one of them hands Hollis a folder. Hollis reads it in the hallway outside the kitchen. Then he walks back in, sets the folder on the prep counter, opens it to the first page. Violations. Hollis's finger taps the list. Temperature logs incomplete. Refrigerator seals compromised. Cross-contamination risks in storage. The health department is issuing a formal citation. $5,000 fine. If it's not resolved within 30 days, they'll shut the kitchen down. Barbara Chen. Power. No leverage. No way to fight back. Except the library. Redstone Correctional has a library. Small, underfunded, managed by a retired teacher named Helen Ortiz, who volunteers 20 hours a week because she believes, despite all evidence to the contrary, that education can transform lives. Marcus starts visiting the library during his 1 hour of rec time, not for recreation, for research. Helen notices. Second week, she approaches him while he's reading a thick legal textbook, Criminal Procedure. Most inmates don't read that unless they're filing appeals. You working on your case? Not exactly. Marcus closes the book. But I'm trying to understand how the system works. The system's broken, Helen says, but she says it kindly, without the bitterness that usually accompanies that truth in prison. If you're looking for justice here, you're looking in the wrong place. What if I'm not looking for justice? What if I'm just looking for leverage? She studies him. The gray at his temples, the lines around his eyes, the particular weariness of a man who's been worn down but not broken. Then you'll need more than books. You'll need documentation, evidence, the kind of records that courts can't ignore. How do I get that? Time, patience, and someone on the outside who knows what to do with it when you're ready. She walks away, leaves Marcus sitting with the legal textbook and a new understanding. Leverage doesn't come from one piece of evidence. It comes from patterns, documentation, the slow accumulation of proof that transforms isolated incidents into systemic abuse. He starts keeping records. Not on paper, too risky. Anything written down can be found during a cell search. Instead, he memorizes dates, times, badge numbers, every interaction with Hollis and his network, every violation that doesn't make sense, every punishment that exceeds the offense. He memorizes them all, builds a mental database of corruption that he'll need when the moment comes. The moment comes in year 4. Not dramatically, not with some cinematic confrontation. It comes the way institutional change always comes. Slowly, through the patient work of someone who understands that systems don't change because individuals demand it. They change because someone documents the pattern until it can't be ignored. Marcus has been documenting for 4 years, 1,460 days of observations, cataloged abuses, witnesses who don't know they're witnesses. And then, on a Tuesday in October, everything shifts. A new chaplain arrives at Redstone, Father Miguel Santos, 35 years old, fresh from seminary, assigned to provide spiritual guidance to inmates who've stopped believing in anything except survival. Santos is different. Not naive, not idealistic, just committed to the belief that every person, even men in prison, deserves dignity. He starts holding services twice a week. 10 inmates attend the first service, 15 the second. By the third week, Marcus is there, not for religion, for opportunity. After the service, he approaches Santos. "Father, can I speak with you privately?" "Of course." Santos gestures to a corner of the chapel, relatively private, far enough from the guards that conversations don't get overheard. "This is confidential, right, what you tell me here?" "Chaplain confidentiality is protected, Marcus, unless you're planning to harm yourself or others." "I'm not planning violence." "Good, then whatever you tell me stays between us and God." Marcus takes a breath. "I need help documenting abuse, not just against me, against dozens of inmates over the last 4 years. The warden, Senior Officer Hollis, and his network, they're running a corruption scheme. Fabricated violations, garnished commissary, contraband trafficking. It's systematic, protected, and if someone doesn't document it, it'll keep happening." Santos's expression doesn't change, but something flickers in his eyes. "Tell me everything." Marcus does. 4 years of memorized observations poured out in a 90-minute conversation. Santos takes notes, detailed notes, dates, badge numbers, witnesses, violations, the fabricated health inspection, the $5,000 citation, the $250 per month garnishment, the pattern of abuse targeting Black and Latino inmates, the guards who enable it, the assistant warden who protects it. When Marcus finishes, Santos sets down his pen. "This is extensive. If even half of what you're telling me is true, this is a criminal enterprise operating inside a state prison." "It's all true. I can prove most of it. The question is, who do I prove it to?" Santos considers. "The State Department of Corrections has an internal affairs division. But if the assistant warden is complicit,
and internal investigation might get buried. What about outside? Federal oversight, civil rights organizations, someone who can investigate without being influenced by the people I'm accusing. Leave it with me. Santos gathers his notes. I know people, advocates who specialize in prison reform. If your documentation is as solid as you say, they'll want to see it. How long? Santos doesn't answer immediately. Investigations take time, Marcus. Months, maybe longer. You'll need to be patient. I've been patient for 4 years. Then a few more months won't break you. But Marcus, once this starts, there's no stopping it. Hollis will know someone's documenting him. He'll retaliate. Can you handle that? Marcus thinks about the boot on his hand, the $250 monthly garnishment, the 4 years of humiliation and filth. I can handle it. Santos leaves, takes his notes with him, and the machine begins to turn. Not fast, not dramatically, but deliberately. 3 weeks later, Santos returns. I spoke with someone. Maria Gonzalez, director of the Southern Prison Justice Initiative. She's interested. She wants documentation, witness statements, anything you can provide that corroborates your claims. Tell her I'll get it. How? You're not exactly free to conduct interviews. No, but I know people who are. The network Marcus has been building for 4 years. Not inmates. Inmates can't help. They're powerless, trapped in the same system that traps him. But there are others. Barbara Chen, the kitchen supervisor, who watched Hollis fabricate the health inspection. Helen Ortiz, the librarian, who has access to prison records that inmates never see. Even Officer Rodriguez, who's grown tired of Hollis's corruption, tired of being complicit in abuses he never signed up for when he took this job. Marcus doesn't approach them directly, too risky. Instead, he works through Santos. Messages passed during chapel services, requests for specific documents, offers of testimony. Slowly, carefully, the evidence accumulates. Barbara Chen provides maintenance logs showing the refrigerator seals were replaced 3 weeks before the fabricated inspection. Helen Ortiz copies commissary records showing Marcus's $20 monthly garnishments, payments for a violation that was never properly adjudicated. Rodriguez, in a moment of conscience, provides internal memos showing Hollis's directives to target specific inmates for discipline. All of it goes to Maria Gonzalez. All of it gets compiled into a case file that grows thicker every week. And Hollis notices. He doesn't know exactly what's happening, doesn't know about Santos, about the documents, about the investigation building in the background, but he senses something. The way predators sense when prey stops being afraid. Marcus gets called to the warden's office on a Friday in November, 4.5 years into his sentence, 2 years from parole eligibility. Hollis is waiting. So is Assistant Warden Vance. So are Barrett and Chen standing by the door like enforcers at a mob meeting. Freeman. Hollis's voice is flat. You've been talking to people, making accusations. I don't know what you're referring to, sir. Don't play stupid. We know you've been meeting with the chaplain. We know you've been asking questions, trying to build some kind of case against me. Marcus keeps his expression neutral, his heart hammering. I attend chapel services. That's my right under prison regulations. Hollis stands, walks around the desk, stops directly in front of Marcus, close enough that Marcus can smell the coffee on his breath. You think you're smart. You think because you've been documenting my badge numbers and memorizing dates that you can bring me down. But you're an inmate, Freeman. You're a convicted felon. No one cares what you have to say. Marcus doesn't respond. Doesn't need to. Because Hollis is wrong. Someone does care. Maria Gonzalez cares. The Southern Prison Justice Initiative cares. And in 2 weeks, when their formal complaint gets filed with the Department of Corrections Inspector General, the entire system will be forced to care. But Marcus doesn't say that, doesn't reveal anything, just stands there, quiet, compliant, the perfect image of an inmate who knows his place. Hollis's fist comes fast, slams into Marcus's ribs. Pain explodes. He doubles over, gasps for breath. Hollis grabs him by the shirt, pulls him upright. This is your warning. Stop talking. Stop documenting.
Stop whatever the hell you think you're doing, because if you don't, I will make your life so miserable that you'll beg for solitary just to escape me. Understood? Marcus nods. Can't speak, can't breathe properly, but he nods. Good. Get out. Marcus leaves the warden's office, stumbles back to C block. Deshawn takes one look at the bruises forming on his ribs and shakes his head. You got your leverage, yeah. So what happens next? We wait. For what? For the system to move. 3 weeks later, it does. Not with fanfare, not with raids or arrests, just a memo, distributed to every staff member at Redstone Correctional. The Department of Corrections Inspector General's office has received allegations of misconduct involving staff members at this facility. An investigation has been opened. All staff are required to cooperate fully with investigators. Any retaliation against inmates or witnesses will be treated as a separate violation and prosecuted accordingly. The memo is signed by Inspector General Patricia Hollis, no relation to Warden Hollis. Patricia Hollis is a black woman, 20 years in corrections oversight, known for her refusal to tolerate institutional corruption. She's also the person Maria Gonzalez contacted when the Southern Prison Justice Initiative compiled Marcus's documentation. The investigation begins immediately. Not subtle, not quiet. Inspector General Hollis arrives with a team of 6 investigators. They set up in a conference room usually reserved for staff meetings. They interview inmates, one by one, pulled from their cells without explanation. They review records, commissary logs, maintenance reports, disciplinary files. They examine the fabricated health inspection, the missing complaints, the garnishment records, and they interview witnesses. Barbara Chen testifies about the inspection. Helen Ortiz testifies about the commissary discrepancies. Officer Rodriguez testifies about Hollis's directives. Even inmates who'd been too afraid to speak before, men who'd suffered under Hollis's corruption for years, find their voices when they realize someone's finally listening. The investigation takes 8 weeks. Warden Hollis is placed on administrative leave in week 2. Assistant Warden Vance is suspended in week 4. Officers Barrett and Chen are reassigned to administrative duties pending the outcome of the investigation. The kitchen returns to proper management under Barbara Chen. The commissary garnishments stop. The retaliation that Marcus feared never materializes. Because the one thing corruption can't survive is documentation. The evidence is overwhelming. Fabricated violations, selective enforcement, patterns of abuse targeting minority inmates, financial schemes involving contraband trafficking and commissary manipulation, political connections that protected the network for years. All of it documented, all of it corroborated, all of it impossible to ignore. The Inspector General's final report is 127 pages. Marcus never sees it. Doesn't need to. He sees the results. Hollis terminated. Vance terminated. Barrett and Chen terminated. Criminal charges filed. Conspiracy, fraud, civil rights violations. 3 officers facing federal prosecution. A network dismantled. A system forced to change. And Marcus, 6 months later, standing before the parole board. First time eligible. The board reviews his file. 12 years served. Exemplary behavior. Work record in the kitchen before the fabricated citation. No disciplinary issues. Letters of recommendation from Barbara Chen, Helen Ortiz, Father Santos. The board deliberates for 50
minutes, returns with a decision. Parole granted, effective immediately. Marcus walks out of Redstone Correctional on a Tuesday morning in June, 7 years after he walked in. The same heat, the same humidity, but everything else different. Sarah is waiting outside the gates, Keisha beside her, 16 years old now, taller, older, still his daughter. She runs to him, hugs him, doesn't let go. "Daddy." Marcus holds her, feels the weight of 7 years lifting. Not gone, never gone, but manageable. "I'm sorry," he says, "for everything." "I know." Sarah's voice is quiet. "But you're here now. That's what matters." They walk to the car together, drive away from Redstone, away from the corruption that defined his life for 7 years,
away from the system that tried to break him and failed. Because Marcus Freeman learned something in prison, something that Hollis never understood. Power isn't permanent, systems aren't invincible, and the people at the bottom don't always lose. Sometimes they document, they wait, they build leverage slowly, patiently, until the moment comes when the system can't ignore them anymore. And then everything changes. If you think this story is over, you're wrong, because Marcus Freeman has work to do. The Southern Prison Justice Initiative wants his testimony. Civil rights lawsuits are being filed. Federal investigations are expanding to other prisons in the state. The corruption didn't begin with Hollis. It won't end with him. But it will change, one case at a time, one inmate at a time, one small victory that makes the next victory possible. That's how justice works. Not all at once, not perfectly, but deliberately. And Marcus Freeman, the man who survived 7 years of institutional abuse, the man who documented corruption when no one else would listen, the man who refused to be broken, is just getting started. The boot on his hand, the fabricated citation, the $250 month garnishment. He remembers all of it, files every detail away. Not for revenge, for accountability. Because systems that refuse to change must be forced to change. And the people at the bottom, the ones the system assumes will always lose, sometimes have something the system doesn't expect. Patience, documentation, and the stubborn, irrational belief that justice, delayed and denied and buried under corruption, still matters, still exists, still wins, eventually. Stay with me. This is just the beginning. 3 months after his release, Marcus Freeman sits in a federal courthouse in Atlanta, not as a defendant this time, as a witness. The trial of senior correctional officer Wendell Hollis has drawn media attention, not national coverage, but local news, advocacy groups, prison reform organizations watching to see if accountability is possible in a system designed to protect its own. Marcus takes the stand, raises his right hand, swears to tell the truth. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Jennifer Okoye from the DOJ Civil Rights Division, approaches. "Mr. Freeman, can you describe your experience at Redstone Correctional?" Marcus does. 4 years of documented abuse, the fabricated health inspection, the garnishment scheme, the retaliation, the network of corruption that operated openly because no one believed inmates would ever be heard. And throughout his testimony, Hollis sits at the defense table, flanked by his attorneys, wearing a suit instead of a uniform, trying to look like a man wrongly accused instead of a man who spent 23 years building an empire of abuse. The jury doesn't buy it. They've seen the evidence, the maintenance logs, the commissary records, the testimony from Barbara Chen, Helen Ortiz, Officer Rodriguez. The pattern too clear to deny. The trial takes 2 weeks. The jury deliberates for 6 hours. Guilty. All counts. Hollis is sentenced to 15 years in federal prison, the same system he'd controlled, the same walls, the same rules. But this time, he's on the other side. Justice isn't perfect. Assistant Warden Vance takes a plea deal, 5 years, reduced sentence for cooperation. Officers Barrett and Chen face separate trials, the outcomes uncertain. Some of the corruption network will escape accountability. Some will walk free, will never face consequences for the damage they caused. That's how systems work. Not perfect, not complete, but better than nothing. And better is what Marcus builds on. He testifies in 3 more trials, consulting work for the Southern Prison Justice Initiative, speaking engagements at law schools, his story becoming a case study in how institutional corruption gets dismantled. Not through dramatic confrontations, through patience, documentation, the slow accumulation of evidence that transforms invisible abuse into undeniable truth. Sarah watches from the gallery, Keisha beside her, proud. Marcus catches their eyes during a recess, smiles, the first real smile in 7 years. This is what leverage looks like. Not power, not revenge, accountability. And the knowledge that the people at the bottom, the ones the system assumes will always lose, sometimes win. Not always, not easily, but sometimes. That's enough. That's everything. Marcus Freeman, the man who survived, who documented, who refused to be broken, walks out of the courthouse into the Georgia heat. Free. Finally. Completely. The boot on his hand is a memory. The fabricated citation is evidence in a federal case. The 250-month garnishment is a line item in a lawsuit that will cost the state millions. And Hollis, the man who thought his power was permanent, is beginning year 1 of 15 in the same system he'd corrupted. That's not justice. Justice would mean none of it happened in the first place. But it's something. And something, Marcus has learned, is what you build on. One small victory at a time, until the system that tried to break you finally breaks itself. Stay with me, because this is what fighting back looks like. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just patient, deliberate, and ultimately inevitable. When enough people refuse to accept the unacceptable, eventually the unacceptable becomes impossible. Marcus Freeman learned that in a prison kitchen, scrubbing floors, memorizing badge numbers, building leverage one observation at a time. And now he teaches it to inmates, to advocates, to anyone who will listen. The system isn't invincible, power isn't permanent, and the people at the bottom don't always lose. Sometimes they win. This is how.